Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today's webinar, Hawaii's Changing BI Landscape. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Today's session is being recorded and will be available to attendees in a follow-up email as an on-demand version. There is also a Q&A chat box if you'd like to ask questions at any time during this presentation. However, we are reserving all questions till the end of this presentation. Now on to our webinar. I am delighted to introduce today's presenters. We have with us today Dina Turning, is CEO and Managing Partner of Pacific Point, a Hawaii-based business and technology consulting firm specializing in managing and implementing large-scale enterprise applications. Joining Dina from Pacific Point is also Shane Kawa, a consultant at Pacific Point. He specializes in data management, BI system implementation, and custom dashboard development. Also joining us in today's webinar is Kurt Budd from Tableau. Kurt is a sales consultant manager who has been with Tableau since 2011 and currently focuses on helping customers define and develop solution architects to fit their needs. I'm excited to have them share their expertise with you all today. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dina. Dina, the floor is all yours.
I want to make sure you can hear me. Hi, Denise. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's discussion about the changing BI landscape or business intelligence landscape in Hawaii. I am really excited to be having this webinar because it's something that I've had the opportunity of seeing the landscape of Hawaii, of BI in Hawaii, changing over the last several years, and really looking forward to sharing some of the trends that we're seeing and also getting some of Kurt's perspective on this. So the way that we're going to do this is Kurt and I will discuss these trends. I'll share what we're seeing more from a local perspective, and then Kurt will jump in and share some insights on what he's seeing more broadly as we cover each of these four themes. I hope that you'll find the discussion not only interesting, but hopefully valuable insights for your own organization. So there are four main themes that we're going to discuss today. Several of them do overlap a bit, but they are distinct. The first is self-service analytics. The second is data security. The third is data analytics in the cloud. And the last one is multiple data source integration. So let's jump right in. So for self-service analytics, and by the way, for each of these trends that we'll talk about, the way that we'll do it is we will share from you what we're hearing from some of our customers and our clients here in Hawaii, and then we'll discuss what our customers are doing about them. So again, with self-service analytics, I would say that this might be one of the #1 topics that we're discussing with customers as we get out and talk to customers pretty regularly about their data challenges. I would say that just about every organization is trying to figure out how to truly implement self-service analytics. And I think the reason why is that the pain point is very common, as you can see from the quote that we put on the screen. You know, it just reflects a very consistent message that we're hearing. And business users are many times, they know what the questions that they're trying to answer, but they can't get to that data easily, maybe with the tools that are available, or maybe they can't create the reports themselves because the tools maybe are complex to use, or maybe they don't have the data. And probably most commonly, they just burn cycles trying to involve maybe an IT department to get the data or create reports for them. And so we hear many clients saying that it just takes too long, or the results they get back aren't quite answering their business questions, and so they would have more questions and they burn more cycles. And so there certainly is an incredible amount of frustration and a resolve to sort of figure out how to deal with this. I was recently working with a client who was expressing this exact frustration, saying, you know, if I could just do something simple, like drill down on that report and see that underlying data, or if I could just filter a few things, then I could get my questions answered, but I don't, so I just give up. And so we hear a lot of this, like, I just give up on it, or well, that's good enough. It's not really exactly what I needed. And I think it's a challenge, and we're hearing a lot of customers trying to figure out, you know, how do we implement self-service in our organizations? And I wanted to get Kurt's thoughts on this. What are you seeing, Kurt, from a more broad scale perspective on this topic?
Excuse me, sorry about that. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head here in terms of just this change in the workforce and the change in their expectations in terms of what people should be able to do. People have just come to expect that they can self-serve in so many different aspects of their life, and so it's no surprise that those same expectations come to the workforce, and people should be able to self-serve answers to their business questions. And the frustration typically is that the tools at hand aren't inherently designed with that frame of mind. They're designed with the frame of mind of a workforce that came from a generation ago. And the tools have matured a little bit, but they haven't fundamentally changed to enable self-service. There is a whole new category of self-service analytic tools that has emerged in the last decade that's designed to solve that problem. There are tools that start at the very beginning of the process, providing a self-service, business user-friendly way just to get a hold of data and do some basic preparation of the data so that it's suitable for analysis. And then there's a related category of tools that are designed then to take that analysis, take that data, and have lay people, if you will, turn that data into meaningful analytics for the business. So there is, like I said, just this generational shift that has occurred, and the result of that is that we as an industry are starting to catch up with that generational shift with sets of tools that are designed to enable that self-service both on the data prep side and on the visual analytics side of it.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. So then the next quote that we have up here, and this is just a sample quote that we've heard from some of our customers about data, is on the topic of data security. And I think it's such an interesting thing because typically, from our experience here, is that self-service analytics, the previous topic, generally becomes the driver for some of these other business intelligence trends, and it's true in this case as well. I think it makes a lot of sense. Many people have long considered governance and self-service to be natural enemies. How can you control data, in one hand, but yet make sure that people are doing good analytics with the right data, with anyone working, having that flexibility to be able to work with it. So what we're seeing is like this push and pull, It's like, okay, I want to have self-service analytics, but now wait a minute, how do I manage data security? So this trend has really come up a lot as a point with many of our customers here in Hawaii. And it's an expression of trying to understand how to truly implement it. I think that's really what it is. They want to solve for it, but trying to figure out how to truly implement self-service analytics while balancing security and governance has been the challenge. And I think it's really interesting, too, because many of the clients have business users who will ultimately try to empower themselves, and they go out and do that. They'll get data any way they can to get the intelligence they're looking for in some cases, essentially cutting out, a level of data governance in a sense. And so what we're seeing a trend now with our clients is devoting a lot of effort and energy towards really getting their heads around how do you have governance and self-service work in concert together. And I think there's a recognition that being able to do self-service analytics with the proper data security requires an entirely different way of thinking than had been in the past. And so, at least from a Hawaii perspective, I can say that many of our clients now that we're speaking to are saying, how do I do this? And this would be a good time for maybe Kurt to chime in on, what he's seeing on a more broad scale as well about putting governance into practice.
Yeah, so, a lot of what you said, I think just kind of hits a nail on the head, if you will, around data being the thing that should be governed. Traditionally, what we've done is we've governed reports. We've governed an analytic artifact of some kind or another, and we've said, you can use this thing, but you can't use it. And that's not necessarily responsive to new users that come along and have slightly different questions that they want to be able to ask. Kind of one of my favorite personal experiences with this shift of thinking was an experience that happened over the course of a little over a decade with a client of mine down in Southern California, a movie production studio. Back in the early 2000s, I worked for Business Objects, and I implemented a system for them that provided some very structured reports for some part of their business. Fast forward to 2012, shortly after I joined Tableau, I went back to visit that customer for completely different reasons, totally unrelated to the work we were doing at the time. And of course, we needed to talk about how we're going to use Tableau to solve a problem that this customer had, and it was all about this whole end-user self-serve, let's give the user the tool that they can use to answer their own questions. Where do you get the data? And the answer came back, well, we get the data by using the Business Objects button to export to an Excel spreadsheet, and then we take that and we put it into Tableau. So we have this governance that is on a report. The report itself becomes useful. The report's useful, but really the data beneath it's the thing that's most important. And these people have come up with a way to be able to get the data out and do something else with it in some more nimble tools. The challenge there is that the data is no longer secured, is it? Right? It's in an Excel spreadsheet. You're now dependent upon just the integrity of the individuals that have access to the data to do the right things with it, both in terms of its interpretation and its dissemination. So what we want to be able to do, instead of governing the reports, which we just proved doesn't work, we want to govern the data. So we want to put some semantics around the data, and we want to put some rules around who can see which pieces of data, and then let people use self-service analytic tools to ask and answer their own questions of that data. That's really one of the key things that's changing in the market these days.
Perfect. All right, awesome. And the next topic that we have up is data analytics in the cloud. And this is an interesting one, I think, for us in Hawaii, and probably not just in Hawaii. I think it's in other locations as well. But it has come up more and more for us here, and I think it depends on the industry. It depends on the type of customer or client that we're working with. But in general, I would say that clients in Hawaii are starting a slow embrace of cloud and cloud analytics, cloud in general, but certainly cloud and cloud analytics to share and consume web data. We have clients that are storing lots of data in the cloud because they don't want to get rid of a lot of backup data, but they're not necessarily doing anything with it, but they're starting to realize that maybe they can or maybe they should. And we also have clients, coincidentally, using Tableau Online. So essentially, they can publish their data extracts, their visualizations to Tableau Cloud with all that data security and governance in place. So I think people, at least from what we're seeing, are starting that slow embrace of data analytics in the cloud. And I think our view on this trend is that Hawaii might be a little bit slower to embrace it than maybe other locations, but I think it's something that is coming up with a lot less resistance over the last, I would say, in the last just year to 2 years from our discussion. So I don't know, Kurt, what are you seeing on a more broad scale on this topic?
I don't know that you're necessarily as slow to adopt cloud as you may think you are, right? There's so many cloud systems out there that are just pervasive. We use them and don't even think about it. Salesforce is one simple example, but there's tons of other tools that are out there in the market, Eloqua, Marketo, things that you use in your personal life, Dropbox or Facebook, whatever it happens to be right there. These systems are just pervasive these days. They're a part of our everyday life, both personally and professionally. There was a study that was done last year by an organization called EMA, Enterprise Management Associates, and they essentially asked the question, how important is cloud analytics to your business? Of course, the question presumes that you're using cloud-based data, which most of these respondents were. Half of them said that an analysis of this cloud-based data is essential or important to our business, almost existential, right? If we can't do this, if we can't analyze this data effectively, it has some existential impact on our business. And that really just means that the other half of the respondents haven't gotten to that point yet in their life cycle. They probably will. I think one of the interesting challenges here, and I think it's something that you're going to get into in a little bit, Dina, isn't just analyzing the cloud data in and of itself, but starting to analyze data that comes from both cloud and on-prem, right? There's just tons of architectural things that come up, but I don't want to get ahead of myself here.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. A perfect segue into the next topic. Yes, multiple data source integration, and this one is a really big one for us, you know, from the conversations that we're having. I mean, it was only, literally just a few years ago that even our team was working on projects with these lengthy enterprise data warehouse projects that we're initiating here just a few years ago. And some of these clients, I don't think necessarily completely finished their data warehouse projects. Some are now looking at changing their plans or maybe considering alternate solutions or a combination of different types of solutions that maybe you're going to talk to more, Kurt. But, you know, I think, you know, the goal is, right, to get this data to the right people quickly, and that's not necessarily a small challenge. And because data lives in so many places, that makes it, you know, very challenging. So now we're having clients asking us about tools that can handle, you know, connecting to multiple data sources and about how they can combine and blend and join data sets with more agile tools and methods. And it certainly is a way of thinking, a change in the way of thinking from trying to gather every bite of data in the same place and rather being, you know, more of a data explorer. And so it's an interesting thing. I think it's incredibly common. I mean, as you mentioned, spreadsheets in one of the earlier examples that you talked about. I mean, large enterprises to small companies, spreadsheets are everywhere. They contain a ton of valuable data. You know, getting stuff from maybe a third party or, like you said, connecting to Salesforce or wherever it may be, it just sometimes doesn't necessarily always make it into that enterprise data warehouse. So I would say that being able to figure out how to connect to multiple data source integrations is going to become, or maybe it already is, really a requirement. Kurt, I know you've got a lot to share on this one. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a big one, right? Enterprise data warehouses are, you never quite get there with them, right? They take loads and loads and loads of effort before they deliver anything of significant value to the business. And due to their complexity, oftentimes what happens is the business loses faith in the ability to have something that delivers value quickly enough, and oftentimes the budget for these big giant projects just gets cut. Meanwhile, you know, businesses these days are trying to be as agile as they possibly can and trying to move as quickly as they possibly can and respond in the moment to things that are shifting in the market. So, you know, I think what you're going to start to see more and more and more of are agile tools that will enable people to combine data from all of these different cloud and on-prem data sources together. And there's really a couple of different categories of these tools that will exist. Right? You're going to continue to see industrial strength ETL tools like Informatica that will be there for the big giant traditional enterprise data warehouses. You'll see those tools continue to evolve and continue to embrace connectivity to cloud-based data sources. And Informatica is probably the best of the best in that space. But you're going to start to see emergence of tools that are designed for the layperson who wants to be able to get connected to data in a hurry. Right? Examples of this are tools like Alteryx and LavaStorm, which are really designed with just a layperson in mind to be able to go quickly get connected to 2 or 3 different sources of data, smash the data together so that we can do some analysis in a hurry. Now, it may be that some of that analysis needs to be hardened and turned into an industrial strength part of the enterprise data warehouse. It may just be that this thing is fine living on its own as its own little bespoke piece of ETL work. That's just an implementation choice that you can make on a case-by-case basis. The other thing that is emerging that I think is really, really interesting is not necessarily moving the data at all, right, but doing some on-the-fly federation of the data. There's a couple of vendors out there that I've been looking at lately that I think are interesting. Data Virtuality is one, and the other is called Denodo, and their thing is all about on-the-fly consolidation of data from multiple sources and creating a federated virtual data mart so that you never actually have to move the data. It just is this federation engine that knows on the fly how to go find the data wherever it happens to live. And in fact, you're even starting to see some of those sort of data virtualization capabilities, data federation capabilities evolve and appear directly inside some of the analytic tools themselves, Tableau being one example of that. We have some nascent capabilities inside Tableau that will allow an end user to go get connected to and federate multiple data sources on the glass, if you will, inside one of their dashboards. So although it sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, this data integration gets exciting, right? It really is an interesting space to watch. There's an awful lot that's going on there. All of the stuff that we've been talking about, whether it's the change in the way we do governance, the change in the way in which end users want to consume data, the change in which we want to do some of this integration of the data, it's all just symptomatic of a much bigger shift that's happening in the workplace, and a much bigger shift in the way in which people relate to their data. And I think that's what we're going to be getting into next here in this presentation.
Perfect. Thanks, Kurt. So this is Shane for everyone on the call. So to further illustrate what we've been noticing both in Hawaii as well as on a national level, I thought it'd be helpful to continue describing the paradigm shift that we've been noticing has been taking place. So from our experience, some of the biggest challenges that companies are facing are lengthy, multi-year enterprise data warehousing projects that are oftentimes preventing these companies from harnessing the true value of their data to help answer some of the more critical must-have business questions, right? So, however, as technology continues to evolve, many companies are beginning to seek out new ways to adopt what we're calling Agile Analytics. They want to get the right data to the right people and in the shortest amount of time possible. But as we all know, this isn't always necessarily an easy thing to accomplish. So a lot of the time, the data might be living in multiple different places, it may be dirty, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result, working with these multiple different data sources can be tedious or impossible, or even sometimes both, right? So as we look towards the remainder of 2016 and into the future, we should expect to see a lot of new players entering the data integration and BI space. With the rise of these sophisticated integration tools and the addition of new data sources that are popping up daily, companies are going to stop trying to gather every byte of data in the same place, and instead, data explorers will start connecting to each data set where it's living natively and start combining, blending, and joining with a more agile tools or methods. So to illustrate what the process might look like, I'll go ahead and use a quick and simple whiteboard example. So over the past several years, I've had the opportunity to work with many companies ranging in size, anywhere from small to medium to even enterprise-sized organizations, in order to help them achieve a more quote-unquote data-driven culture. Through working with these companies, I've noticed that the majority of the top-performing companies are able to achieve similar results, like being 5 times more likely to be data-driven, or improve their productivity and profitability by 5% and 6% respectively. While no two situations are necessarily the same in terms of company size, industry, or even the BI practices that they may have, most companies have similar overall high-level objectives, like identifying new sales growth opportunities, gaining customer insight to drive profitability, or attracting and retaining their top talent. So regardless of where a company stands with regards to its data practices, each company typically falls somewhere within what we're calling the decision-making continuum. So on the left-hand side, we have opinion-based decision-making, where these are typically the decisions that are based on our gut instinct, as opposed to being able to support our decisions with the data or the historical data. And on the right-hand side, we have companies that make more data-driven decisions. So these companies typically leverage that historical data to help guide their decisions and support their hypotheses of where they want to go. So while there is no exact science for making the perfect decision, we believe that leveraging both our gut and historical data to make these more data-driven decisions is typically where we see our customers having the most success. However, in order for these folks to be successful, most of these companies first have to get past several common hurdles. First one being people. So in order for a company's BI initiative to be more data-driven to succeed, there needs to be the proper support and buy-in from its users. If this isn't in place, the project is most likely going to fail. The next one is experience, right? So do the people at your company have the right tools, the right skill set, the right training, et cetera, to be successful using the tools that we're providing them? In order to work with the data, users should first be familiar with what they're looking for, where they can get it, and how they can go about answering their questions. And the last one is time. So more than ever, time is becoming one of the most precious resources we have. So with what seems like an endless amount of work to get done, helping folks find the time to actually invest into learning something new can often be the biggest challenge that many companies face. So even if that means saving more time in the future, making an upfront investment is difficult for a lot of these people. So the Venn diagram we see here helps to further illustrate what the traditional approach to BI used to look like. So within an organization, almost everyone has questions they'd like to get answered. However, of those folks working at the company, only a small subset are actually able to work with that data to get the results. What's worse is that the intersection between those who have questions and are able to actually think like business users and those who can work with the data is even smaller, and that's typically around 8%. And so with this in mind, we end up creating this bottleneck effect here, where in this picture, the sad faces are the folks within the organization who have questions, right? So in order to get these questions answered, these users must rely on what we call the report factory, or IT, or the analytics department. To produce these reports, the report factory oftentimes has to go and pull the data from many different data sources, spin it into some sort of dashboard, and send it back to the end business user, only to later find out that that initial report that had been created caused more questions that then needs to be put back into the queue to be edited again. While in a perfect world, a one-to-one relationship between business user and IT would ideally exist, we obviously know that this is not a realistic expectation from a logistical standpoint. So instead, users are forced to wait in that repetitive queue, which can oftentimes take days, weeks, or sometimes even months to get all of their questions fully answered so that they're feeling comfortable that they can move on with that data-driven decision. And when these business users don't have the time to wait, many of them are starting to turn to third-party applications or trying to pull their own data and reports using Excel, which only creates an even larger nightmare for IT in terms of issues about data integrity, validity, that start coming into play. So for example, if I were to pull data from last week, and you guys were to pull data from yesterday, although we're working off of the exact same data set, we could have wildly different results. So because of this bottleneck effect in the report factory and the issues that arise from users pulling their own data without having any real understanding of the database structure and the relationships and groupings that have been predefined, we see companies running into problems like loss of time and speed. So having to revalidate the data or be forced to wait for the report factory to go ahead and respin that report. We also run into costly decisions. So what kinds of consequences will be the result of making these purely opinion-based decisions? And then the last one is loss of talent. So other companies are becoming more data-driven and adopting a self-service analytics model, while some companies are stuck in the traditional or more conventional ways. And so when you think about how do we attract new top talent as well as retain our existing top talent, thinking about the types of tools in the environment that we're providing to our employees really comes into play there. So with these potential issues in mind, many companies are moving towards a more self-reliant model where instead of taking weeks or months, decisions can now be validated and made in a matter of literal seconds, minutes, or even hours. So not only are companies able to save money, make better decisions, I've also seen company morale increase due to the fact that employees are now actually being able to focus on what truly matters and what they're truly passionate about and getting it done in a reasonable amount of time, as well as getting some time back so that they can spend that extra time with their family and other loved ones. So this is basically what the self-service model looks like. So instead of relying on the report factory, business users are now able to work with the predefined data sets provided and governed by IT to ask their own questions and that natural business user logic through an easy drag and drop user interface that's going to allow them to go through that iterative process of asking questions, getting results until they reach that quote-unquote aha moment where the light bulb goes on, and then they can make those data-driven decisions. So as a result, we now see the new Venn diagram where the intersection between those who want and those who can has been greatly increased to about 80%. And these are just rough estimates. So by empowering the business user to be more self-reliant and fostering a more data-driven culture, many companies experience an increase in revenue or total gained value, and that's mainly caused by an increase in productivity, an increase in the total number of decisions being made, and a decrease in the amount of time it's taking to make these types of decisions and analyses. So from a high level, I think that gives us a pretty basic and good understanding of some of the changes that we've been noticing. I'm going to go ahead and pass the ball back to Kurt, who's going to talk a little bit more about our next topic.
Yeah, the thing that's going to happen over time is that you know, there's this vacuum that exists right now. You've got all of these crazy data sources that exist and little ETL tools that I've made reference to, and new ways that people want to be able to consume the data, and this new generation of people that want to start asking and answering their own questions as rapidly as they possibly can. Right now, what this is producing is almost a little bit of chaos in the market in terms of lots of vendors coming in to fill these voids. What you're going to start to see happen over time, once these voids all get filled, right, once all the friction gets resolved in terms of the difficulty of getting data or cleaning data or analyzing the data, we solve those problems with these loads of individual vendors that go and do their own unique things. Enterprises will take a step back and take a look at this and ask themselves whether they really want to do business with lots of individual niche players, or if they would prefer to work with a new stack vendor of one kind or another. And so I think over time what you'll start to see is the emergence of a whole new generation of BI stacks that sort of evolved and will emerge in a way similar to the way in which business objects emerged with its robust stack of capabilities and Cognos emerged with its robust stack of capabilities 20 years ago. I think you'll start to see that same thing happen in the future. But the first thing that will happen is, you know, the individual gaps themselves getting filled by a huge variety of vendors, like some of the vendors that I've already mentioned today.
Cool. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks for that overview, and thanks, Shane, for the whiteboard. I really enjoyed seeing that. That was cool. And I guess I know we're going to open it up for Q&A in just a few minutes, but I wanted to at least introduce our company and indicate that we would certainly love to help for those that are based in Hawaii. We're here. And I think we're able to relate to some of the challenges that organizations are facing here, and hopefully that is valuable for you. And we do offer a broad range of services, and we've grouped our services into strategy consulting, information assistance, implementation services, as well as managed services. And we can really help at whatever stage of your data journey you might be, from maybe evaluating or planning your BI roadmap to implementing a self-service solution, maybe pulling in data sets, creating visualizations, or if you aren't sure where you are, we can certainly help with you to help define a path to moving forward. And another key point I want to say, in case it wasn't clear, is that we are also proud to be a Hawaii Tableau partner. On the next slide, I know we're going to talk about getting connected as well, and I've put my email address up here, so you feel free to contact me directly. Shane's part of the team too, and there's others, but feel free to contact me directly. In addition, I wanted to mention that we recently started a Tableau user group, a Hawaii Tableau user group, I should say, and it's we're connecting ourselves just through LinkedIn right now. So if you go onto LinkedIn You can just search in there for Hawaii Tableau user group and start getting connected to people who might be at different stages of their use of Tableau. Some are, just data enthusiasts. Some are actual Tableau users. And some people are not quite, using it yet, maybe a different maturity level. So we're just getting the group going. I think it's been out there for just a few months. So it's a great place to connect with other people in our community on this topic. So I think that's all I had, Janice.
Yes, thanks, Dina. Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Shane. Really appreciate you spending time with us today. For all of those who are in the audience, we will now go ahead and open up the Q&A. So if you have a question for any of our presenters today, feel free to go ahead and submit it in the Q&A chat box that you see on your screen, and then I'll go ahead and facilitate that with the presenters. So it looks like we have a question coming in. The question is, how do we work with getting our IT team on board with a self-service analytics methodology?
I'll let Kurt take this one.
I was thinking that you'd want to cover it just from a services perspective, but the question was, how does an IT team start to implement self-service analytics?
The question is, how do we get our IT team on board to buy into self-service analytics methodology?
I think the first thing to do is to think of it in terms of what you're going to be buying for the IT organization, and what you're buying them by implementing self-service is you're buying them the opportunity to get out of doing a bunch of nauseatingly routine work and starting to do things that are a little bit more important to the business. Right, let's get IT out of the business of maintaining the weekly TPS report and changing the sort order on the darn thing, and instead get them into the business of focusing on things that are more important around the integrity of the data, or making more data available to more people in a more meaningful way. So I think in terms of trying to position the benefits first and getting them on board with those business benefits, once they get it, once they understand that, then they'll be ready. They'll be in a frame of mind to accept this.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think another important piece there is to realize that a lot of times the interest for using a self-service model might initially start off with the business user's need for easier or quicker or more understandable reports. But I think working hand in hand with IT down the road to really make sure that everything is fully vetted, fully validated, and making sure that both parties are on the same page in terms of IT is still going to have full control and governance over the data. We're not talking about just creating the Wild West there and just letting all the business users just have full reign of whatever's in the databases, but using things like Tableau Server to leverage Tableau's data server so that IT can still have full reign and govern really who's going to be having access to that data, what type of access do they have, and really taking advantage of that user level permissioning is something that I think a lot of IT people get worried about when you start throwing around the term self-service or ease of use. And so really making sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of expectations and what that's going to really look like moving forward, I think is a pretty important place to start.
Great, thank you. The next question is, we experience very similar data challenges that you mentioned in today's presentation, one being data integration. Where would you say we should be able or look to start?
Where should we start with respect to data integration challenges? I mean, it's like any other project that you start off with, right? The first thing to start with is defining the problem, trying to figure out what the issue is that you're trying to resolve. If you're trying to solve just some personal data integration challenge that is going to be relevant for one person or one work group, then you're going to attack the problem with probably a different set of tooling and a different set of knowledge and skills than you would if you're trying to solve a data integration problem that is relevant to the entire enterprise. Just take my work for example. I do work with systems here at Tableau that my department is involved with, and I'll do it on the back of an envelope. But there are things that I use that are also used by other people across the entire company, and you better believe that those data integration challenges are being done in a much more rigorous way. So answering the question first around the scope of the data integration problem, that's the most important thing you can do first.
I think, yeah, thanks, Kurt. I think the other thing is, like, we've talked to some other clients about, maybe picking a high-value area and saying, okay, what are the 3 or 4 key questions, business questions that you're trying to answer? So you pick an objective, and then we start to work backwards, and we say, okay, well, where would that data come from that would help you answer those questions? And you start to find those, as you point, I think what the person is referring to is multiple data source integration, and you see, okay, well, I've got a data mart here that I can pull from, and I have a spreadsheet here that I can pull from, and those things will help me answer this question. So you sort of start with the end in mind and think about what questions you're trying to answer, and sort of work backwards and say, okay, now how do I get to that point? And kind of slice out some pieces of it rather than biting off the whole chunk, which might be more complicated. That's something that we've talked to customers about. But again, like to Kurt's point, you have to factor in, who's using, there's a bunch of other things, but I think picking sort of that end in mind, like if I can just start with these few questions or this business objective as an end goal, as a starting point, then you start to work backwards and figure out where those data sources are and get those connected, create the metadata needed, the data models, and move that into that, and then distribute that out where needed.
Great, thanks. If there's any further questions, feel free to go ahead and submit them in the Q&A chat box. I'll see if any more come in. Give it for a few minutes. Alrighty. Well, it doesn't appear that anybody else has any further questions. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and put Dina's contact information here in case you'd like to go ahead and reach out. Oops, my apologies. It looks like another question has come in. The question is, I've heard the term data-informed versus data-driven. What are your thoughts around this? And that might be Dina. Do you have any comments on the difference between when you hear data-informed versus data-driven?
I don't know if I've heard data-informed as much. I've definitely heard data-driven being as, where a situation in which you're using that as a way to drive decision-making, as a way to drive the direction of the organization. Informed, I don't think I've heard that as much, so maybe Kurt could speak to that a little bit more.
I've never heard the term either, but in just thinking about this a little bit, I was thinking about my experiences working here at Tableau as sort of a case study, as an example. There are some things that we do where we'll send out a scorecard to somebody, and they know where we are, they know what we're doing, they know what our revenue pipeline is, for example. So there's just some useful information. But the other thing that we do at the rank and file level with data is we use it as a way to direct people throughout the course of the business day. So our account managers here work with an account manager level dashboard literally by the minute that will inform them about who the most important and most active customers are right now on our website. And that dashboard will literally drive the users to the systems that are necessary for them to do their job in the moment. Same thing with our technical support organization. We use data visualizations to drive our technical support engineers to the most important customer issues that are in our customer service queue in the moment. So we're literally, I love the word data-driven, that's what we do. We literally drive employees by giving them data that tells them what they need to do next in the moment.
Yep, great. Thanks, Kurt. Another question has come in. Are there examples of data governance models that address data federation and combined with cloud on-premise models? Who becomes the steward for the combined data?
I mean, if you ask, are there data governance models that address this federation? I mean, I don't know if there's any kind of a third party out there that has some kind of a data model that you can buy that blends on-prem and cloud data together. Certainly there are tools like Tableau that enable us to do some semantic modeling of these pretty rich scenarios where we have a blending of data that comes from on-prem and cloud data sources. So the question is, who becomes the owner of that semantic model? That's an implementation question. And again, it gets to how broadly you're going to disseminate that semantic model across the organization. Right? I do a little bit of this for my work group. I've got, 10, 15, 20 people that I work with. I'm the owner of that semantic model. I'm the one that's in charge of it. But as soon as I want to have some kind of a model influence the information that's getting to several hundred people inside the organization, there's probably a completely different person inside Tableau that would need to own and manage that model.
Great, thanks. And I think we have time for one more question if anybody would like to go ahead and submit it. Going once, going twice. If no other takers, then we appreciate your time today, everyone. Thank you again for joining us this morning. And I'd like to thank again my presenters for sharing their expertise and knowledge with us today. And with that, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.